Hello and welcome back to The Wargamer, and in this tutorial I'll be showing you how to paint one of the Heritors from Frostgrave Ghost Archipelago, and I'll be using the Army Painter range of paints to do so. Now unfortunately some gremlins got into the system and corrupted the first two shots of this tutorial, so I'm going to briefly cover them here. Now first of all, you want to prime your miniature, and what I've used on this video, as you'll see later on, I've used a mixture of a black primer over the entirety of the miniature and then sprayed a white primer up from above. This gives us some pre-shading which will really help us in later steps. Following the priming, we now want to base coat the shirt and also the trousers, and for this I'll be using some Banshee Brown. Now as of all the base coats in this tutorial, I would recommend creating a mixture of 1 part paint to 2 parts water, because when we apply this over the miniature, we'll really take advantage of the pre-shading that we've already done. So now that we've got our footage back, you can now see the pre-shading and also the Banshee Brown areas we painted in the last step. Now the next step is to paint the blue cloth that's hanging from the Heritor's waist. Now for this you will want to use crystal blue, following the same base coating technique as I used for the Banshee Brown. The next area of this miniature I'll be tackling will be the leather areas. This includes the boots and also the pouches around the waist, and we want to base coat all of these areas using dirt spatter. With the leather areas completed, I'll now be tackling the sash around the Heritor's waist, and for this we want to use a nice bright colour of Mythical Orange. With this being quite a bright colour, you may find that you need to apply several thin down coats over the surface in order to get a really nice solid block of colour. The next area to tackle is the purple jacket of the Heritor, and for this we're going to be using Wasteland Soil, which gives us this nice deep purple colour. Now make sure to keep that 1 part paint to 2 parts water ratio going, and you'll really have some nice shading between the lighter parts at the top of the jacket and the darker recesses in the folds. The next area to tackle is the sheath on the dagger that's been held around the waist. It's a very small area, and for this we want to use a base coat of Dragon Red. Now you may notice I've switched down to a smaller brush for this, as it is quite difficult to reach and you don't want to overspill onto the areas that we've already painted. We will now be finishing off the jacket by painting the trim using Basilisk Brown. Now whilst the paint is called brown, it's actually more of a golden yellow and really fits in with the opulent theme that this miniature has. The next base coat we want to apply on this miniature will be to the skin, and for this I'll be using Oak Brown, again following that 1 part paint to 2 part water ratio that we've been using for the duration of this tutorial so far. Now as faces often draw the attention of the viewer of the miniature, we want to spend a little bit more time on these areas, so I'm going to be using a highlight of Leather Brown to pick out some more prominent facial features such as the brow, the bridge of the nose, the lips and also the cheekbones as well. With the skin completed, I'll now be tackling the beard, and for this we want to use a base coat of Castle Grey. Now this is perfect for giving that aged look. It gives us a nice slightly greyish brown colour, gives the illusion that this beard was once brown, but age has made it slightly grey. This next step is entirely optional, and what I'll be doing is applying some stripes to the trousers, and for this I'll be using Leather Brown. However, this time I'll be using a mixture of 1 part paint to 1 part water instead, as we want to get a nice even coverage over the lighter coloured trousers. It's also helpful to use a smaller brush for this and really take your time in getting the spacings correct. With all of the non-metallic areas of the miniature completed, we can now move on to painting the metals. The first of which being the blade of the sword, and for this I'll be using a base coat of plate mail metal. This time however I'll be using a mixture of 1 part paint and 1 part water instead. The final base coat to apply is one of Greedy Gold, and I'll be applying this to the pommel of the sword as well as its sheath, and finally the detailing on the dagger as well. With all of the base coats completed, the next step is to apply some washes over our miniature. These washes will flow into the recesses and help to bring out some of the detailing in the miniature. Now the first wash that I'll be applying on this particular miniature will be soft tone ink, and I'll be applying this over the linen areas and also the orange sash as well. Now when applying all of your washes, I would highly recommend creating a mixture of 1 part wash to 1 part water, as applying it straight out of the pot may be a little bit too strong. The next wash to use is strong tone ink, and this time I'll be applying this over the leather areas, but also the skin on the miniature as well. When applying the wash over the jacket, we want something that will maintain the bright colour as well as getting shading in the recesses, so it makes the most sense to use a purple ink here. Just be very careful when applying it to your miniature, as you don't want to overspill onto the linen coloured areas, as it will really stand out on those areas, so just take your time and use a thinner brush around these hard to reach areas. The final wash to apply over our miniature is one of dark tone. Now this is essentially a black ink and will just give us some neutral shading. So I'll be using this on the sword, but also the blue area on the miniature as well. The very final step in painting this miniature is an optional one, and this is basically to apply some highlights to the edges of the areas that we've already painted. Now this is very straightforward to do, simply use the same base coat colours for the areas, but just mix in a small amount of matte white into the paint. Roughly 1 part original base coat to 1 part matte white should suffice. Then using a thin brush, lightly drag it along the edges of these areas to create a lighter colour on the edges, and this will just really enhance the detailing on the miniature. And here we have the completed Heritor. Now you may notice that I've painted the eyes on this miniature using matte white and matte black. This is entirely optional and only feel comfortable doing this if you have a steady hand and a fine brush. Now in the description below you'll find a full list of the paints that I've used in this tutorial, along with some links to the equipment that I've used in this video as well. You will also find links to both my Facebook and Instagram pages, which you can follow to find out what projects I'm currently working on. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please do let me know in the comments below, and also make sure you subscribe to be kept up to date with all of my future videos. And finally, I just want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, because it's you guys who make these videos possible. Your support really does help me to produce more content and even better content as well. So a big thank you, and if you're interested in supporting me as well, you should definitely check out the link in the description to my Patreon page, and from there you can donate to me from as little as $1 a month, which just really help me in making these videos. So all that's left to say is thanks for watching and goodbye.